Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, October 19th. Now I'm going to warn you that in today's stream, there might be a point, there's a small chance that I might have to just end the stream very early and abruptly and take care of something else. In Monday's stream, I got a kind of emergency phone call and ended up having to deal with that for several minutes with the stream still going, and I want to avoid that. Apparently, seems like there's some bug that they fixed here. Not a lot here. Alright, also, I think it's worth mentioning as far as the accountability section, since it's really the only thing I did yesterday that's video game related, is the second dinner Ben Brode game, Marvel Snap. We knew it was coming. We didn't really get a release date, and it just came out via early access on Steam. And so I live streamed it, trying to get it as fast as possible, trying to get any potential views or extra views you might get from that, and made a live stream looking at it, kind of figuring it out, and eventually just realizing that it's not particularly a game I think that would work for me to replace. To replace Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. They've introduced apparently this new kind of idea around deluxe card backs. What are deluxe protectors? Change the appearance during duels. Changing protectors will not affect what happens in duels. So they're getting visually fancier as ways of showing card backs, but it all just doesn't matter. It's stupid to have all of this stuff available for purchase. Although, in comparison to Yu-Gi-Oh! To Marvel Snap, at the very least, Yu-Gi-Oh's store makes some sense. Whereas there's a lot less to buy in Marvel Snap, but there's a lot less reason that you would buy anything in Marvel Snap. Because the only thing that they even really start to push on you is a $9.99 premium battle pass, which you don't even see until you get past basically 2 levels of an intro season pass or battle pass where everything is free. So there is no initial push to purchase anything. There's a welcome bundle, and then there's also like gold you can buy, but I'm not 100% sure what the gold was even for. Like, it's not really logical that you would spend any money on Marvel Snap, because Marvel Snap is too simplistic of a game, and it's too much of a pick up and play game where it just doesn't feel like you'd ever really feel invested in it. Instead of buying cards, everybody in Marvel Snap is on the path of unlocking cards, and you unlock more cards by upgrading cards, instead of having, like in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the regular version of a card, and then maybe a foil version of a card, and then maybe there is like a extra shiny version of the ultra rares and super rares in Yu-Gi-Oh! So there might be 3 tiers of upgrades or different versions. That may even be more than actually exists. It may just be that super rares and ultra rares have shiny versions, and that's it. I think everything has, I don't even know. It's so unimportant in digital games for these things. I'm going to open 3 packs here. We have enough gems. We needed to do this earlier. The hope here is to get what we want to get. Get a reasonable amount of cards for this expansion. and have any secret packs that unlock lead to secret packs that we really don't need to purchase. See, so like this is a foil version of that card. Is there an extra special version on a normal rarity for a foil version? I don't think so. There is probably a foil version for ultra rares. But unfortunately, I got exactly one view on the Marvel Snap live stream, and that one view was me. And I watched it back later. Nobody has any interest or any ability to see anything with Marvel Snap in the name, because they have named it incredibly horribly. Like, I cannot blame my own content creation at all when I'm getting 0 views. If I'm getting 1 view and then I get no more, then maybe that's because I didn't keep that one viewer interested in watching the video all the way through, because it was like a 2-hour quick look, which I'm using the phrase quick look now instead of spotlights. Quick looks never meant quick in Giant Bomb, and I don't think anybody else really used the phrase quick look too much, so I'm just straight up gonna steal that. It's become ubiquitous enough in my mind that I think that's a more descriptive way to describe it. So unfortunately there is no way to go back and change the word spotlight to quick look on any of my old spotlights, but going forward, just to differentiate from the word shorts, which we're now doing shorts, and it was shorts, then spotlights, then live streams, then pre-recorded material. Now it's going to be shorts, quick looks, live streams, and pre-recorded material. But yeah, the Marvel Snap from the movie probably has hundreds, if not thousands, if not maybe even millions of videos already on YouTube that makes it impossible to search the game Marvel Snap. And almost certainly Marvel Snap is going to fail as a game. And that's a harsh prediction to make, certainly. But just because of poor search engine optimization alone, unless Marvel Snap becomes something that you just get for free if you have a Disney Plus login, and it gives, and Disney gives free cards to people with Disney Plus. That's about the only thing that would possibly keep it relevant enough in front of people's eyes. But yeah, the previous stream I had 12 views as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! So that if the algorithm is working the way it should be working, or it says it works on YouTube, there should have been a decent amount of people, at least 25-50 people, who would have been suggested to watch Marvel Snap, and not a single person took it up on that. As far as impressions, I guess I could try and figure that out, but it's not even worth it. On top of that, when I later on, several hours later, watched 100% of the video, and thus have 100% watch time on that video, then that should have given Marvel Snap, the video for Marvel Snap, a bump for just having a ridiculously high amount of watch time, and it should have been put in front of more people's eyes. And yet it didn't happen. So this is yet another example of trying something new and trying to be like early to something, and it just not being rewarded for small YouTubers. Like, over and over again, you get this advice from people who usually don't have YouTube channels or never have run one. that you should just play newer games and you should do it fast. And there definitely is a push even from YouTube to do that, and it just doesn't ever pay off. Wow. That's a lot of good card packs there. I don't want to devolve into sounding like I'm just whining, but I am just trying to report as far as my experience as being a content creator. So yeah, that was a waste of time. I did it, I tried it, good on me for trying something new and different. Maybe there is a point where you just have to push through it, and if you just had an infinite well of money, and just bought new games and played them once as soon as they came out, that would start to work for you. But I don't even see, as far as the small number of gamer shows that I have on YouTube and watch on YouTube, like, I don't see anybody or follow anybody that's playing new games. PewDiePie is doing more of a travel abroad in Japan, now that he lives in Japan thing, and he's not really playing games at all. And if he does go back to playing a new game, I assume it's going to be something fairly simplistic, like Minecraft. Most of the gamers that I follow are Minecraft gamers, which is a very old game. It does still get updates. There was a recent update that I don't know if it added anything interesting, because I really didn't pay attention to it. And Minecraft still gets modded versions that change it quite a bit, with new versions of like all the mods. But yeah, Game Grumps are pretty consistently always playing old games, and not really even doing much of that. G4 was just shut down, which that should also be a consideration as far as a potential source of people playing new games. Giant Bomb is not really covering new games. There aren't a ton of new games at the moment anyways. Now there is an interesting question here at this level. Should I just call it good enough? Because I've opened 2 packs here, and while there is a lot of ultra rares and a lot of super rares still, you've got pretty much every rare and common in multiple copies. So before we come back and open a third 10 pack on this, let's look at the secret packs and see if either one of these really has a better offer, although it would be hard to have a better offer because you're really just going to buy 10 cards through these, because yeah, each pack in a secret pack really only has 2 cards that are from that pack, and then it's kind of a considerably worse offer. I mean, this kind of is a candidate, but I think really when I look at it, you're probably better off buying one more pack here first before you make any other decision. We're just hoping we'll get an ultra rare, and there isn't an ultra rare pack here, which means this could really screw us over, and we may have to buy another 10 pack of this. Yeah, Marvel Snap has like 7 layers of upgrades on their cards, so you have as far as I can tell, and there was a lot of stuff that, as I was learning Marvel Snap, I said at the beginning that proved to be totally wrong by the time I was at the end, and some of that may have not even been corrected by the time I was at the end of the video. But I mentioned like the animated life 2D aspect of cards and said that might be interesting. Well, it turns out that at the 3rd or 4th level of upgrade, you do start to get live 2D animations of the cards. You just don't start that way. Inherently, the cards would have no flavor text at all in Marvel Snap, and it is just a picture of the Hulk. And the Hulk will be framed into a border, and that's pretty much all the card is. And it will have an attack or a power level. It's not really an attack because there is no defense, and it will have an energy cost. The power level and energy costs never change. There are variants of the same card, so you might get an 8-bit pixel version of Hulk, but that's about it, and that's the only variant. But then the 7 levels of upgrades start with him with the Hulk, the exact same picture each time of the Hulk, pretty much, and then he'll be inside the frame. And then when you upgrade it, it will say frame break, and then the layer which has just the Hulk, not the background, will be zoomed in a little bit more, and the edges of the Hulk's hands and head will be over the edge of the card. And then when you upgrade it again, it'll say 3D, and it will bring like the Hulk text where it says the Hulk at the bottom, that's there too, a little bit closer, so that the parallax effect as it tilts back and forth is a little bit more extreme, and the background will go back a little bit further in the background. And then the next level, and that's as high as I got, says animated, and at that point you get the live 2D effect where it's still the exact same image of the Hulk. He's still being frame broken, so he's over the edge. He's still 3D, but now you get the little live 2D effect where it wobbles back and forth. I don't know what the next 2 levels of visual upgrades are, but that's your entire goal as far as collecting cards in Marvel Snap. There's inevitably a limited amount of Marvel characters that can exist that's going to be smaller than, say, Yu-Gi-Oh, where I can just constantly make more cards. And so they're really trying to put as much content, or the feeling of as much content. Thank goodness. I really needed to get an ultra rare in this tin pull, and I definitely will take 2 ultra rares. But yeah, that's all you're doing. Now, in a game where all you're doing is gaining resources, which it's confusing, frankly, because effectively you're gaining this currency called boosters, which seems like it really is just duplicate cards after each gameplay. But to upgrade the visuals on the cards, which is the only way you really upgrade the cards, they don't change their effect at all. You also need this secondary kind of almost free currency, which makes it very confusing because there is also a gold currency and there's like a couple other currencies. For a brief second I thought they may even have a stamina system. They don't have that, thank goodness, but there's just a lot of currencies, and because of the battle pass situation, after you play a game, you very often will go collect a reward for the daily quests and the battle pass, and by collecting those rewards, it will then push you to a different part in the menu to go collect different rewards that you've just unlocked by collecting the first rewards. So several times in the game that really is designed to only last about 6 minutes or so. Yeah, the games always last 6 turns. No more, no less. As far as I can tell, there's no early or late win conditions. There's no way to lose if you run out of cards. Or win if you make your opponent run out of cards or anything like that. But yeah. It totally has you jump around the menu and spend a lot of time collecting these currencies for no reason, because the game is way simpler than that. The game is super simple. It's not as simple as, say, something like War, but it is really a fairly dumbed down trading card game experience, and really it's more of a deck building game, because everybody's going to have the same cards at the end of the day if they played enough. Alright, well, this one's a category. A good one to get, so let's get 10 packs here. We got some ultra rares, thank goodness. In fact, this is a pretty great draw. But oh yeah, I was thinking of different packs. You get 4 cards from the selection group, the pickup cards, which is a much better deal than only getting 2 cards. But yeah, Marvel Snap has ongoing effects and on-reveal effects, and then it has like one other card I saw that just has an effect that says it always starts at the beginning of the game in your hand. And that's pretty much it. So you have 2 key phrases. You have a power that starts at 1 and ends at 6 on the 6th turn. You get 1 power on the first turn, 2 power on the second, and so on and so on. There are 3 lanes that you're playing your 12 cards decks into. So you practically play almost every card in your deck every... well, practically, for most scenarios, you will play every card in your deck every time you play. And 4 of your cards normally can go into each of the lanes. The lanes are modified because there are these locations that affect both sides of the field most of the time, and they have special modifiers as far as what they're doing. And you start with 1 location revealed, and then next turn the second location reveals its effect, and to next turn after that the 3rd location reveals its effect. But that doesn't prevent you from actually playing in the 3rd location. And so very basic strategies fairly quickly show up, and because of that, I literally just kicked butt at it. I won non-stop because I got bored and wasted a bunch of time and played a lot more off-screen after the fact. I won non-stop for probably an hour and a half, and then I lost once, and then I won non-stop probably for another 40 minutes. Like, it's super easy to win. Now, oddly, even after doing a 2-hour setup and going through all the tutorial, there was yet another tutorial section that unlocked later on that didn't really tell me anything new, but in part their tutorial setup is just totally awful in the case that that you are jumping between real world games and tutorials 2 or 3 times when you really should have just been in the tutorial at the very beginning to explain everything. And that's not how the first tutorial is. The first tutorial doesn't have energy, so it has you play a completely different game from what really exists. It doesn't explain energy, it doesn't explain card effects, it doesn't explain anything. It's just having you play a completely different experience, which doesn't make any sense when you should have just had one long tutorial to say, here's what the cosmic cube does, which I'll explain that in a second. Here's the power markers, here's the energy markers. They want to make it seem like the game is even simpler than it actually is, which is ridiculous. And then there's just no reason to have you through these tutorial modes. There is no separate like story or option to reset and play the tutorial sections a second time. Yeah, I guess at this point this would probably not be the best of candidates to go again on. What the Cosmic Cube is, I think it's the game Backgammon has this dice and you're kind of gambling for pips, and so you can double, and then either the player has to accept your opponent has to accept a double where you're gambling for 2 pips instead of 1 pip, or 2 points versus 1 point. But then they can double again, and then they can double again. That's all the Cosmic Cube is. Which makes the game incredibly gambly. And you really want to avoid that, particularly for a game that you are trying to sell to little kids, because that's who this has to be targeted to. This really has to be baby's first card game. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. So having that whole gambling aspect is just a horrible mistake. And that's the big sales pitch, and they don't even let you know what the Cosmic Cube does until you're at level 10. So more than 2 hours, really, or just about 2 hours of gameplay before you can start using the Cosmic Cube, which that's kind of ridiculous. For a game that's designed for each round to really only be about 6 minutes, although honestly I think it's probably longer than that. Maybe it gives you 2 or 3 minutes per round. They say you're playing against your opponent at the same time, so you don't have to wait. I many times had to wait, so that's not really true. Yes, you don't take turns, both people play at the same time, but the reveals happen after the slowest player ends their turn, so you are not seeing the cards in real time being placed so that you can play against them. And it doesn't really change a lot other than to make things a lot more gambly by having people play at the same time. There's just this ideas of trying to speed things up that don't work and really are just odd experiments. And that's the problem with a lot of collectible card games in general, is that you're kind of constantly either copying Magic the Gathering and doing what Magic has done and changing very little from Magic, or you're trying something completely different and it just doesn't work. There is definitely a reason why Magic's system and the way Magic does things has stood the test of time for a specifically large amount. One of the things, though, that I definitely could see about Marvel Snap is that it desperately needs a second way to play with those cards. There are 5 buttons on the cell phone interface, which, by the way, the Steam version is just a cell phone port and looks awful. But there are 5 buttons on the main menu, and 3 of them should probably be hidden and in favor of other gameplay methods. It feels like you probably should just have a no effect, even simpler version of the game where it is just playing war and you're just playing the cards as fast as possible. And then it definitely feels like there should be a more complicated version of the game where you're taking turns and actually playing a bigger strategy. And that's an interesting thought, probably just because I just had it, to perhaps have cards that have a level 0 effect, a level 1 effect, and a level 2 effect. And at level 0, no card effects are applied at all. You just ignore them. At level 1, you only do what is the first line of the effect, and at level 2, you do the first line and the second line of effect. Which that would be a lot of extra text, certainly. But yeah, that would certainly add a lot of value to cards while hurting the visuals, but since it's a digital game only, there's no real problem with that. And a level 2 may simply be something as simple as saying we have this different class of cards like counters or spells or traps, and counters, spells, and traps are just not playable on level 1. Yeah, that's a decent collection. If I got another 10,000, another 1,000 gems, I don't think I need to come back and get any more of that. So hopefully, now the question is, would we want to find out here that I already have a decent amount of these cards? Not really a ton. I could see buying another pack of that, but then buying another pack of that would just lower my setup. Let's see how many crafting points we can gain from dismantling extra cards now. 530 normal cards, 470 rare cards, 10 from super rares, and 0 from ultra rares. Now, noticeably, I could have been playing the regulation duel instead of playing Marvel Snap, and that would have been probably better. I could have even been playing ranked instead of Marvel Snap, and that probably would have been a better use of my time. It being called Marvel Snap instead of just Snap is a mistake. Like, they need to, and almost certainly will, spin it off at some point and try to add the other Disney properties, and even potentially try and get DC characters in it. It makes a lot of sense for Mickey Mouse to start to show up in a game like that. It makes a lot of sense for the Star Wars characters to show up in a game like that. It'd be very weird if Second Dinner tried to make spin-off games that were Star Wars Snap or Disney Snap, instead of just trying to make it more of a Smash Brothers type experience. And since Marvel is owned by Disney, it makes all the sense in the world. There is no cross promotion as far as I can see at all. I don't think Disney is promoting Marvel Snap at all. Nor when you click on a card to see it, do you get any kind of description of who the characters are, nor do you get any kind of lore or a link to any kind of web page or comicsology, which would have made so much more sense. Marvel has been very consistent about not having any kind of cross promotion in any of their properties, which inherently I think that is just Marvel admitting to themselves that they don't really want people to read the comics. They've got their diminishing fan base as far as comic book readers. They want people to just have a general impression that they like these characters and recognize these characters for Marvel movies. But yeah, when you're getting characters that are just completely unrecognizable, it's kind of silly. There are noticeably X-Men that show up, whereas the X-Men aspects of characters have never been particularly successful in movies because Fox owns the rights to them. But yeah, there's not like a Pokédex, which it really needs for these characters, and there's not really the greatest of ways to look at the cards other than through the deck editor, and there's a decent amount of cards that you'll eventually unlock, which will make the deck editor just unmanageable. It's in early access, but I have to say that a lot of the visuals on the menu were glitched. Consistently, the menu was glitched on the Steam version. And I don't know if there's anything else really worth saying. It's really just a mess of a concept that's missing anything that you would have expected Ben Brode to have added, as far as Hearthstone was an evolution and was doing a lot of interesting things compared to Magic the Gathering, and it was kind of the first digital only game that had those kinds of evolutions and those kinds of ideas, but there's just nothing like that in Marvel Snap, which makes me heavily suspect that Ben Brode, like many people in the video game industries, managed one way or another to be labeled as the golden child, the brain behind Hearthstone, when either where it feels like now either he had one good idea and then is rejecting everything that was a good idea in Hearthstone in favor of trying to promote a worse idea, or he was just never the golden child in the first place. And the success of Hearthstone and the creativity and ingenuity in Hearthstone came from somebody else, or some other group of people, more than likely. So all of the hype, all of the kind of hero worship around Ben Brode, which at some point I may have even fallen into a little bit of that, just doesn't seem like it was due. Like, having seen Marvel Snap now, unless they just made that on a shoestring budget and they just didn't have the people and the resources, and they were actively trying to make a small game to then work towards their next game, like, you could have hope that that's the case and hope their next game is going to be good. Their next game almost certainly is 2 to 4 years from now, though, and I don't know if Second Dinner as a company will even make it that far. Inherently, if Marvel Snap was being done on a shoestring budget, they still have created a system where they needed an animator to animate a lot of cards in several different ways, although I imagine what they did is they animated the best version of the cards and then they created a script to remove some of the effects and make the image look worse. The frame break versus being trapped in the frame almost certainly was an automated process, and the live 2D versus the non-live 2D version uh, are about the same. So yeah, if the next two levels just add more effects like stars and sparks flying around or wind effects or things, those all really do feel like they are just layers that you could toggle on and off in something like Photoshop. But they're gonna have to make more cards, and every time they make more cards, it's gonna take a little bit more resources than you would in an average card game, because you've made 7 different visual versions of those cards. And being trapped into the Marvel characters, making more cards is going to be harder than you would think. So I almost wonder if they aren't going to make more cards, and then the game is just going to dry up. It has thousands and thousands of levels that you can go up if you just kept on playing the game. But you'd practically have to be autistic to want to keep playing the game, when it's going to get super boring even for an average little kid player. There's just not going to be any variety there. And there's no social aspect to it. It does have copying and pasting and sharing decks, which, in all fairness, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel still does not have that feature. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is a much more fleshed out experience, and it really is only 6 months to 8 months old. I also would warn people that because it's saying it's early access now, you may make a ton of progress and then find that they reset your progress when it comes out of early access. They may also change their monetization aspects, but I wouldn't guarantee that they'd change it for the better and get rid of monetization. It's not really a game that feels like it has a justification to ask for any money whatsoever. It would probably be better by far to be something you get for free and can only play if you have a Disney Plus account. And if Disney Plus ever had like an app, like Netflix has an app for cell phones, this could be the first game that you get for free for having that app. They could put ads in it. Certainly, that wouldn't be good. But I could see a lot of young players being more willing to watch ads than to actually spend money. But yeah, at that point, I would say I've talked too much about Marvel Snap, and effectively I've effectively covered it in only maybe half the time that it took me to cover it the first time. So I'm just repeating myself. I'm way more upset, frankly, that the video effectively wasn't even given a chance by YouTube's algorithm than I am then I am really upset about Marvel Snap as a game. Marvel Snap is a game like many others that is okay, but not good enough to really play. It's definitely not good enough for me to want to play it, and inherently it wasn't ever going to work anyways. There's a real problem with the fact that you play at the same time and it surrenders. So even in the tutorial, while I was talking and trying to learn the cards, the fact that it threw me into a the fact that it threw me into a real game, and then I was trying to learn what was going on, it had me surrender, which it's deceptive in how it says surrendering too, because you click retreat and then it says you escaped. It doesn't say you surrendered or give any negative connotation to it, and inherently that is because the gambling aspect of doubling the number of pips you might win or lose changes how you're actually going to play Marvel Snap. They literally want some players at high levels to just refuse to continue to play these incredibly short games and just surrender, which that's not a good system. That doesn't make sense. Let's see, let's toss this. Put this face up. Activate that. Yeah, the gambling aspect is really a misstep. I imagine if you are at the top tier of a very long ranking ladder in Marvel Snap, you very possibly would choose to surrender sometimes and not increase your risk. But I wouldn't be surprised if most players are trained to just accept the risk and play it anyways. Because otherwise you're just going to end up surrendering no matter what. Okay, let's talk about video game news. And in particular, I want to not delve too deep into the story because we talked about it a lot in the previous live stream. For the most part, both Video Game Chronicles and Bloomberg have independently confirmed through their sources or verified through their sources that the old Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2 voice actress is completely lying about what was offered to her. Like, now that's maybe the wrong way to phrase that, but there is definitely a complete contradiction here of what was offered her. And there is room, I suppose, that if she just misunderstood and this all led to a big misunderstanding, like there's room for that. There's room for Platinum Games being able to get all of their legal department and their facts and their employees to agree with them and lie for them, and basically cover up what really happened. You'll never really know the truth in most scenarios, but there is definitely a very high chance here that she was completely misleading people, even though she is doubling down and sticking by her story. I kind of believe that that's highly probable, because the call for the boycott and the potential screwing over of all the other employees at Platinum Games, the other voice actors that worked on that game, by hurting the potential sales of the game, does seem to be incredibly selfish. And the reaction that $4,000 is an insulting amount is probably a little bit ridiculous too. So the actual number that Bloomberg is reporting here, if we can get the exact in the case of Bayonetta, the developer appeared to be determined to rehire Taylor, according to two people familiar with negotiations, as well as documentation reviewed by Bloomberg. Here's where there's accounts differ. Platinum Games sought to hire Taylor for at least 5 sessions. I believe these were for 5 hours. So, 5 hours of work, paying $3,000 to $4,000 for 4 hours in the studios. So 20 hours at either $1,500 to $20,000. $15,000 to $20,000. That is a big difference between $4,000 whole cloth, but it is the same number. So either Taylor, the Western voice actress, and I must emphasize, she is the Western voice actress. She doesn't have that much of a resume. She was replaced by a much more seasoned voice actress for the English part of Bayonetta, and the Japanese Bayonetta voice actress is freaking Ghost in the Shell Makoto, main character, and has been way more properties and is way better known. And it's a shame that nobody's mentioning her at all too. But yeah, $3,000 for 4 hours, sign me up. Sign anybody up. That's way more money than the average person would get for 3 hours of work. Now, arguably, the argument will come down to, well, these voice actors don't get that many jobs. There just aren't that many voice acting opportunities. Nintendo in particular has been very shy about having voice actors do a lot of voice acting in games, particularly games where, like the JRPG games that Nintendo makes, where that would be a lot of dialogue. And Nintendo inherently is going to have to change that, because more and more you're going to see Sony and PlayStation and PC games having voice acting, and Nintendo's games are not going to get away with just Mario making grunts and going yahoo anymore. We need to, particularly with the Mario movies, start to have a Mario who is willing to talk. It is frankly ridiculous that Mario Odyssey came out and Mario is not really fully voiced in that. Particularly when you have Pauline singing an entire song in Mario Odyssey. But yeah, we're gonna have to go down that direction of more and more voice acting in Nintendo games in particular. So this is Jason Schreier from Bloomberg. That would make the total for the game at least $15,000. In response, they said Taylor asked for a 6-figure sum, as well as residuals on the game, which is ridiculous. So $15,000 to $20,000 is what they were offering. She came back asking for at least $1 million and residuals on the game. Platinum declined, and following lengthy negotiation took auditions for a new voice actor. She didn't want to come back, it seems like. Because you don't ask, you're not talking $20,000 and you come back for $1 million. It is also worth mentioning that what they offered here, they are saying this was actually considerably higher than what she was paid for Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2. In an email, described the account as an absolute lie and said Platinum was trying to save their ass in the game. She says she stood by everything she said in the video. I would like to put the whole bloody franchise behind me, quite frankly, and get on with my life in the theater. Hideki Kamiya, the executive director, called Taylor's allegations sad and deplorable in a Twitter post. And certainly, the question comes down to how much should voice actors be paid? How much work should they be getting? At a certain level, I think some voice actors in video games are under Screen Actors Guild pay regulations, which you would think would give them a little bit more money, but maybe not more work. Definitely, if I was a developer of an indie game and I wanted a voice actor, I would probably, just because of budgets, have to avoid any kind of unionization, or just because the union rates would be too high. Like, you can definitely make games for less than $20,000 as an indie developer and put it on Steam Direct, but it would be nice to have voice acting. When you look at all the visual novels that come out, those companies probably are working on a shoestring budget, and that's why they don't have voice actors. But there is also like Fiverr, and there are voice actors who will do decent amounts of work, or at least it seems like you could hire voice actors on Fiverr for a decent amount of work for less than $3,000 for a 4-hour session, by far. And inherently, this is a lot like the case where the music industry and the arts industry in general have made these kings and queens from their hand-picked, usually nepotistically picked winners in the industry, and you forget about all the people who can play guitar and can sing just as good as somebody like Britney Spears could when she started out, and yet they were just not given any opportunity. And if you added up all of those people who got paid nothing and never were given anything close to a chance to succeed in being musicians, and you averaged down what even Britney Spears and all these celebrity successful musicians have been paid, yeah, you probably would find that there is the average pay between the people getting paid nothing and making music and just putting it out on YouTube for free, and that averaged out to all the celebrities who are getting decent amounts of pay, but most of it's going to the production music industry companies anyways, so they don't have that much money anyways. The truth is, actors are pains in the butt, voice actors or otherwise, and they think they're worth a lot more than they really are, and creation and being creative has become more democratized more than now than ever. The story even goes on to say, several of Taylor's peers spoke out after videos. Brian Deckard, who acted in Cyberpunk 2077 and Red Dead Redemption 2, said she was also offered $4,000. She was offered $4,000 to work on a non-union project for a big budget game. Sean Chiplock, who voiced 3 characters in the Nintendo blockbuster Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, said he was paid about $3,000 for that job. So even amongst her peers, a $3,000 or $4,000 outright for the amount of voice acting that they were asking for was not out of line. Like they're pointing out here, Bayonetta has never been a big commercial success, so I wouldn't be surprised if the budget was even smaller for the third game. I don't know if there's anything else that really needs to be said here. It's very easy, I think, for people to knee-jerk and be misled, I think, by a narrative. Certainly the big corporation, in this case Nintendo, being the bad guy, or Platinum Games being the bad guy. Platinum Games not really a big corporation by any means anyways, but yeah, I think it was easy for a lot of people to side with her without waiting to get the full story. Particularly in this instance, it's very hard to side with Taylor when she definitely wasn't giving the full story as far as her own peers coming out and not really supporting her, and instead saying, hey, that actually is fairly industry standard for the amount of pay. All of these voice actors are frankly on the verge of being replaced by artificially intelligent text-to-speech software anyways, so they are definitely at that risk. But inherently, I don't think people had a good answer to what they thought would have been a fair amount of pay. Honestly, now it seems like had they offered her even double the $4,000, that would have been above average of what people get paid for jobs. Now, 5 4-hour sessions of voice acting is not a lot of voice acting. It's an average amount of voice acting. It gives some hint that yes, there's going to be a decent amount of voice acting of Bayonetta in Bayonetta 3. So it does potentially eliminate the thought that maybe Bayonetta only says one line of dialogue at the beginning of the game and one monologue at the end of the game, or a monologue at the beginning of the ending. And that you're mostly going to be playing as Violet or some of the other characters in the game. So that thought that I speculated on is out. But yeah, I think this is probably one of those cases where not just gamers but people in general are very eager and they're right on the edge of being angry for a lot of different reasons, and being potentially able to just channel anger into something, into hating something, regardless of what that thing is an easy thing to fall into. And I heavily suspect now that most of the people who would have supported this idea of boycotting Bayonetta 3 will quietly not boycott it. I heavily suspect there was never going to be any major boycott in the first place. There is a bigger economic problem with the idea of voting with your dollar, in the fact that a democracy or democratization of voting with your dollar doesn't work, because you don't have one vote per person when you're voting for a dollar. You have billionaires and trillionaires who have thousands upon thousands of times more votes than you. And a vote with your dollar only works if it's like a small mom and pop shop that will go out of business if it doesn't get a sale from you, which is just not the real case for even medium-sized businesses. They can easily survive not having not having your business. Okay. How many do we have in here? Not enough for this to work. So honestly, if you were going to have a situation where voting with your dollar and capitalism equating to democracy, which is frankly just a lie that is propagated, you would only get that if there was maximum sizes available for companies. If companies weren't allowed to sell shares, and if companies weren't allowed to have more than, say, 10,000 employees, there would have to be severe restrictions to balance out the Goliath size of corporations versus the David size of an individual and their pocketbook and their money per coin purse. So yeah, and there's definitely the boycott part of this shows Taylor's hands, in my opinion, but really the screaming on Twitter and getting people upset and the negative association to a game, because there definitely will be people who heard the initial complaint and did not follow up on the story, didn't investigate anything, and they will just be less likely to buy Bayonetta 3, not because they're actively boycotting it or remembering that they're boycotting it, just by not feeling happy and go lucky about Bayonetta 3. The bad press hurts it. There was another story that came out relatively recently, and I can't remember it, so I'm gonna misspeak here almost certainly. I guess it's fair to say that there has been this general narrative that's been going around for the past couple of years that video game voice actors are being underpaid, or in some other way being underappreciated. And this Taylor's claims definitely are built around the idea of evoking that feeling and making a very similar claim. enough so that if the story had been 100% made up, which I'm not saying it is, it's pretty obvious that it isn't 100% made up, it's just possibly 90% made up. But yeah, you could very much have made up that narrative and just not been hired back for another reason. And I cannot blame anybody at all for not counter offering $1 million offer with residuals. That is asking for quite a lot as a voice actress. They couldn't possibly pay. They wouldn't feel particularly good about paying the Western voice actress residuals and a bunch more money than what they paid the Japanese voice actors and the other voice actors who played other characters. It would just be so out of line. Yeah, and don't think for a second that corporations won't pay somebody twice as much for doing very similar jobs, but you don't pay people 100 times as much. Like, that comes out and then all your other voice actors never work with you again. There is a potential desire here for Bayonetta 4. I'm sure they want to leave that door open. You can't lose all your other voice actors by overpaying a diva, and there's no other word to use than diva-like behavior. Or prima donna. Diva, I think, is a better term. Let's go. I really don't need to be doing any of this, do I? Like, the trick here, I guess, would be to take something like this, and then this, and put that there. And what I'm trying to do right now is just link summon things. So that gets the daily quest done. I would hope, and I kind of feel like I would also have been on the other side and sided more with Taylor had she given a number. That is noticeably something that she didn't really put out there, and that would have been a better effect on propagating her part of the story. Is if she had said, I counter offered after an initial offer for $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 in total, since she's saying total, and they came back and offered me $4,000, which I found insulting. Like, even that would have been something that I could have kind of sided with, but let's go ahead and end it here. But yeah, leaving it open-ended really left a missing gap there, and really came to the point where I was wondering what people generally thought would have been a reasonable amount of money. Now, if there's one thing that came from all of this drama, Now I know $3,000 to $4,000 for a job for a video game voice actor is very average. And so next time any voice actor complains about being given underpaid, I can be more informed on the subject. And honestly, if I was an indie game developer and I really had efforts or desires to have voice acting, $3,000, $4,000 even for an indie game for voice acting for a single character isn't that crazy expensive. It is pretty crazy expensive, but not that crazy. I could see making something that has not the highest amount of lines of dialogue, or the highest number of characters, and potentially being able to afford that in some kind of deluxe edition. It certainly goes to show why there have been in the past some games that didn't have voice acting to start with, and then they came back with a deluxe edition and had voice acting added. So the question is, can I get as far as I need to get? Nope, don't do that. Activate this. Do this. Do that. Bring this to the field. Activate his effect. Summon that to the field. And then, let's see, you bring this up, doing that, and that. Yep. This is one of the problems with this deck in particular, though. This is just incredibly slow. That was a bad trade. But don't think it's gonna matter. Okay. So he countered some of my stuff. Well, that sucked, but whatever. Just for accuracy's sake and just so I can show it, here's Video Games Chronicles article too, so it's not just Bloomberg saying it. Sources dispute the Bayonetta voice actor's claim to pay off the offer. Inherently, also, this runs afoul of a what am I trying to say here? This probably highlights where lying, and I have to just kind of assume that at some level Taylor is lying. At this point, there could have been a misunderstanding, and then the dispute could have come out, and she could have said, well, let me look at the paperwork, let me contact my agent. Maybe the agent is lying to her. But doubling down on it at that point, you are at least at that lying at that point, because unless you're 100% certain, unless you've contacted your agent, you've got the paperwork in front of you, unless you know for a fact it really is Platinum lying, because you're really gonna need those receipts to prove your case, because this potentially is going straight to a slandered court case, and honestly, this could have been done in arbitration instead of going public in the first place. Although I don't know what you'd really arbitrate when you didn't get a job. But yeah, I think that the tides are going to turn very quickly against Taylor, and this is really an example of, if you were going to make a lie, it would have had to have been a lie that was way more thought out than I think most people can think things out as far as lies. There's just too much evidence that people don't pay attention to, don't remember, don't ever see. There's cameras everywhere, there's paperwork everywhere in business. Like, you can't just straight up make a lie. The old joke is, if you ever need to prove you work somewhere, in the 80s, claim to work for Blockbuster because Blockbuster's not around and they can't verify your employment history. Well, the truth on that joke is it's not true. Dish TV bought out the rights to Blockbuster at some level, and actively still does have all the employment records and does verify employment history for people working at a Blockbuster. So that's not a reasonable lie. I shouldn't have done that. That was dumb. Maybe he'll destroy this card. But yeah. Tossing this into the graveyard. But yeah, if you're gonna, it really is a deep level of conspiracy that you would have to engage with to successfully lie about something that's unbelievable. If you, for example, wanted to lie about employment history, the thing to do would be to find some business that was run by a small person and went out of business, or their business burnt down or something, and from that there really would be no records, and it would be just impossible to contact anybody for those records. But even in that case, it's much easier just to say you were self-employed during that time, or just say you work somewhere anyways, because the vast majority of the time they don't actually bother to verify employment history when hiring people in a lot of jobs anyways. EA is apparently axing the online features of, and this is GameDeveloper.com articles extra. They're axing online features for older titles, including Red Alert 3, Onrush, and Mirror's Edge. It'll affect 13 titles here. So, a lot of these seem to be console versions of the game, which I'm not sure too many people were even aware they had online things, but it seems like EA is biting the bullet here to shut down online services for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 to the point where Microsoft and Sony themselves are going to eventually just shut down those kinds of services. Anyways, now I guess backward compatibility doesn't save online services, so if you have a backward compatible version of Red Alert 3, that's not going to let you continue to play that. I look at Command and Conquer games as single player games anyways, but there is definitely a multiplayer aspect, and if anything, this is once again just highlighting where you should play things on PC so that you could potentially hack and mod it to a private server. Anyways, a lot of these games are definitely recognizable. They're not going to be completely ignored. Shank 2 is a interesting example because that game pretty much only exists for multiplayer, and I recently played it for the first time, and yeah, that single player aspect is very, very short. It has like 8 levels. The levels are fairly long, but they are not good. Mirror's Edge, I don't even know what Mirror's Edge 1's multiplayer aspects were, but yeah, that does seem like that's yet another thing that you wouldn't really want to lose multiplayer on. Notably, I don't know if any of these games really would have taken that much resources to just maintain. Like, it really does feel like just maintaining your current servers wouldn't have been easier. Alright, let's go ahead and continuously try and banish cars. And that should win it for us. And after this game, I want to check, because we really haven't even gotten into the pattern of the news, and I did say I may have to end abruptly, so what I want to do here, as a rewards list, yes, if I get up to gold 3, I get 100, then you get 50, then 100, 100, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. So you're diminishing returns as you get higher and higher. I'm not sure that there's enough time to get all the way to Diamond 1. But yeah, if I just keep playing, I will get that. I think I'd get that done. It seems like it's not that hard to win. But also, five more duels would get me 50 gems here. Went link summoning. Yeah, I was definitely right to just keep on link summoning and link summoning. Got dailies, which are already done. which that seems like that's new, because up until this point it seems like unless you come in and look at them, you won't have the dailies done. Now what's going to suck today is if I look at the number of views on this video and it turns out to be 0. Because that almost certainly would imply that there is this toxic keywords that if you have the word Marvel or Marvel Snap in your videos, then all videos you make for a while will just be de-emphasized. Oh, it's also worth mentioning that Hideki Kojima's, the Platinum Games director's channel was restricted for a while. The speculation there seems to be that that is an automated process if you start blocking a lot of people. So he was just blocking so many people is the speculation that caused his account to be temporarily restricted. It was back within a day. This is kind of interesting news. Microsoft, and this is GameDeveloper.com again, Microsoft has confirmed that it's laying off some people after evaluating its business priorities. Like all companies, we evaluate our business priorities on a regular basis and make structural adjustments accordingly. Some of these layoffs are in Xbox, and it's around 1,000 workers, which amongst their mergers and Microsoft themselves, before you even talk about all the video game companies they own, 1,000 workers really isn't that much. It's not super crazy. Windows 11 I think is garbage. Microsoft Edge as a browser costs way too much, and there almost certainly are some members in Xbox that are not really doing anything amazing. YouTube Gaming on Twitter is still being completely irrelevant and not with it, is promoting this person, Theft King 2, doing a Five Nights at Freddy's speedrunning, which I don't think Five Nights at Freddy's is worth mentioning. I want to close this tab, so I'm going to show Marvel Snap. You can see the game has 389 reviews and it's 79% positive, so people are liking it somewhat. This trailer is incredibly deceptive, and you do not even see this trailer in the game. This is what you see, and this is the only screen you see when playing Marvel Snap. And even some of this, like Rocket Raccoon here, are not cards that I even unlocked. This animation I never saw in about 4 hours of gameplay. This animation, if I saw it, I saw it for a blink of the eye, because the animations are really short and they don't really mean much. But yeah, it is being better received than I thought it would be, honestly. I think I may have changed the code to finally fix Video Game Chronicles bug in which we were getting way older articles. So most of these have been already talked about. Gotham Knights being at 30 frames per second has gotten a almost 100% consistency negative response. So yeah. One thing that also could come about against these accusations is I wouldn't be surprised if video game voice actors are going to try and make it more prevalent and more public as far as what they're getting paid. Secret pay never benefits the individual, it only benefits the company. There should be a lot more reports. Now, interestingly, Recruiter.com's estimate on what a voice actor gets paid on average doesn't seem to be quite accurate, because it was saying about $35 an hour when $450 or $3,000 for the whole job probably is more than that. So there is also a danger in websites just misreporting what the pays are, but everybody should talk about pay. Any boss that doesn't want you to talk about pay immediately tells you that they're sleazy. A good boss, and there are very few of those that actually exist, really should just have a pay scale or pay grade system, and it should just be posted and obvious. And that's one nice thing about union jobs, is that everybody in a union knows what everybody else is getting paid, because it's all the same and you don't have those little fights. And that makes it easier, frankly, for the boss too, because he doesn't have to try to have people negotiating for raises or negotiating for bonuses or special privileges or anything like that. All of that gets thrown out the window, and everybody has to be treated equally. And hopefully, on the union's perspective, they would be treated equally and better than average, or than they would have been without the union. The Silent Hill presentation should happen, I guess, later this evening. So I probably won't have anything to say about it. But there's definitely a lot of confirmation that something Silent Hill is going to be announced. Although, I don't know if it's just going to be a Silent Hill 2 remake, which is what I think a lot of people would want. I don't even know why people don't want to start at the beginning with a Silent Hill 1 remake. Maybe taking 1 and 2 and merging them together, which would be weird. But it could definitely be other things. Other games, or a mobile game or something. I think we talked about this, but let's assume we didn't. Resident Evil Village's latest Steam update is causing the game to crash. Capcom apologized and says it's looking into a fix. Yeah, Resident Evil Village, I think, definitely was a game that they were trying an improved, newer engine, and it always seemed like it had some real problems. And there was a lot of blame on day one that De Novo was causing the problems, and there was a lot of evidence put out that really pointed out to De Novo causing the problem. Because when they ripped it out and didn't have De Novo in it, all of a sudden the micro stuttering and the pausing and the frame hitching went away in Resident Evil Village. I think we had already covered the new Western voice actress's comment. Yeah, this is the exact same comment that I already covered and talked about. Basically, all she's saying is, I'm under NDA and I really can't say anything. Platinum Games could certainly one-up Taylor by releasing the new voice actress from her NDA and allowing her to speak freely. Which that would be the next step, certainly. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do that. There was also a decent amount I think of what comes down to just uninformed Japanophobia or xenophobia or anti-Japanese sentiment. Just really a small amount of it, not more than it would be expected. Whether there are people just saying, "Well, I've worked with some Japanese company somewhere and they've been all pains in the butt," or this is just a cultural thing that all Japanese companies are jerks and underpay their workers, and some of that definitely is true. But when you're talking generalizations and trying to apply it to a specific scenario, you're going the wrong way. You need to talk specific examples that are provable and use that to lead to a generalization to say, I've seen a lot of instances of this happening in companies. Here are the receipts of where this has happened in companies. So generally, this might be what's happening at Platinum. But you can't take a broad assumption and apply it to an individual. That's just stereotyping. And yeah, generally speaking, I have heard a lot of stories of Japanese companies being pains in the butt. But I also would say my own experience from the outside looking in on Platinum Games as a company does not really make them feel like your average Japanese company in a lot of aspects. So there's nothing you can really know or take from that line of thinking. It would make more sense if Nintendo was doing it, because there probably have been other instances of Nintendo being a very old, 100-year plus old company with old ways of doing things and old ways of thinking. But Platinum Games is pretty new, and the team, most of the people making Bayonetta 3 are pretty new. So I really would say Platinum Games is probably a new generation of Japanese companies that does things slightly differently. Just the fact that Bayonetta is even being released in the West and getting any publication or promotion in the West really says that. Otherwise, Bayonetta would have just been like Oni Chambara, that was released in the West, but there really wasn't any effort to have an English dub or English promotion. Here we have the same, around 1,000 employees being laid off. Let's see. Spider-Man 2 is still slated for 2023 and is making good progress. Quote, good progress, Insomniac says. It's so weird to have released Miles Morales as a side game. And I guess the general idea is maybe they'll have one team working on a Miles Morales 2, while another team will be working on Spider-Man 2, and that they'll just stagger releases in that way. And that might work. The idea of having the idea of having two games in parallel developed is how a lot of games have been made. The Assassin's Creed series was very much like that, where one team was making the good games and one team was making the bad games, and they would tag each other. A Resident Evil showcase, not to be confused with the Silent Hill showcase, date and time has been revealed, and it will feature the Resident Evil 4 remake. It will also feature Resident Evil Village Gold Edition and more. It's coming out on October 20th at 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 11 p.m. I don't know what BST is. Yeah. Is that British Standard Time? Maybe? Who knows? Move on. here we have a story from Video Games Chronicles. Cyberpunk Edgerunners Season 2 is currently not in the works. Producers says, just to be clear, Edgerunners was a standalone work. There's a lot of demand amongst animators. Animators try to get as much work as possible and overwork their animators as much as possible to make as much money as possible to actually be able to pay them, because the amount of pay they get for animating is so low. It's a terrible cycle and a terrible system, to say the least, from what I've heard. So they probably don't have it, Studio Trigger probably doesn't have it in their schedule for the next few years that they could make Edgerunners. But inherently, without trying to spoil everything, there is basically no way you could have made an Edgerunners 2. So much so that it's weird that he even needed to say it. While there are a couple of characters, and I'm not naming any names, that could come back, there is a pretty conclusive ending of most of the characters. That they would not come back because it wouldn't make storyline reasons, or they cannot come back because they are just straight up dead. Now, this is Cyberpunk, so maybe you could take a lot of people's consciousness and put them in new bodies. I don't think the story in Edgerunners was good enough, though, to justify a second season. I really get the feeling that people that like Edgerunners just haven't seen anime before, or like they haven't seen Akira, they haven't seen Ghost in the Shell, or Serial Experiments Lane. Almost certainly most people haven't seen that one. Serial Experiments Lane is by far, I think, a way better take on the idea of computers and cyberpunking and all of that, although it doesn't really have the augmentation aspect, and Serial Experiments Lane is such an old thing that was talking about a potential future internet from the perspective of early 80s that it doesn't really make any sense in the modern day. And if you were going to try and remake it, which there would be no reason to, it would be a completely different story. But there's been lots of cyberpunk type shows before in anime. Sci-fi was a big deal in anime in the old days, in the early 80s, 90s. And it wasn't until later that you started to see a lot more fantasy focus. There was always a lot of fantasy too, but fantasy has pretty much overtaken anime in the past couple of decades. But yeah, suffice it to say, I cannot see a reason why you would want to make a season 2, and I cannot see a way you would make a season 2. If you were going to just call something Edgerunners Season 2, you would probably have an entirely different group of people, or it would have to be a prequel, or it would have to be a story in the middle of the events of Season 1, and I don't think any of that really works. A PlayStation 5 DualSense Edge controller launches in January for $200. This is a more customizable controller, but also I think this may be the first one that they've actually released or announced that will have the touchscreen on the front and potentially haptic feedback on the triggers and potentially tilt controls. Because up until this point, I've tried to figure out, and I haven't seen a controller that has all the features of what PlayStation controllers have had in the past. A back touch screen still, I imagine, isn't going to exist. Yeah, it's going to come with 2 standard caps, 2 high dome, 2 low dome, 2 half dome back buttons. 2 lever back buttons, a connector housing, and a carrying case. But $200 does definitely feel very, very expensive for any controller. Let's see. Xbox Elite Series 2 controllers are now available on the Xbox Design Labs. Players can now customize with their own colors. I'd forgotten that they had done that. The Elite Controller 2s also are too expensive, but in comparison, they are selling for $149 or $209 with all the Elite components. So it does seem like the price for a high tier controller these days is getting up to a ridiculous half of what the console should cost, or getting very close to half of what a console costs. That's pretty insane. I would also question, certainly, whether there is as much durability in these elite tier controllers as the standard controllers, because I wouldn't be surprised if the tolerances when manufacturing a smaller run of elite controllers is way looser, and you will just get things that break, or the control sticks in particular start to drift faster. October's remaining Xbox Game Pass titles have been announced. I think we had pretty much covered this list. Several games here worth talking about. The Forgotten City. I had hoped that would have been a more well-received game, and maybe getting it on October 31st will convince more people to play it, because that really was the finest example that I can think of a mod crossing the line and becoming an actual commercial product. And yet we haven't seen any talk of anybody else taking a mod and making it its own commercial product, nor have we seen a massive amount of success on that effort. I don't want to sing its praises yet, but I did get this very cheap looking pillow that is almost like a little doll's table, and it has like 4 legs on it, and it's very sturdy foam, and it's for posture, and basically what it's doing is it's just stabbing me in the lower back with a little bit of cushioning. But it does seem like it is a little bit sturdier stuff than the pillow I was using behind my back. And just now when I coughed, I didn't immediately spasm my back, which has been fairly consistent lately. Right now, as fall is approaching and winter is rapidly falling behind it, the humidity I think is pretty low, and with the humidity being low, that seems to allow my back to hurt more. I don't know why, just seems to be the case. Moving on with video game news, Mortal Kombat Onslaught is a new mobile game coming in 2023, which, let's see, this is Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate as far as a video, so we don't have any real video here. I wouldn't be surprised if this is not an action fighting game. Mobile exclusive cinematic story experience for the franchise, where players build a team of fighters from a vast roster of characters and unleash a massive real-time group of battles. It feels like it's probably going to be a gacha game. Not too different from Destiny Child, my favorite lewd waifu gacha game that I mention every single stream. Still playing that, not playing it as much. They've put in optimizations so you don't have to play the game as much as you used to, which gets the dailies done faster, and it's appreciated, but it also means I'm spending less time actually looking at the game. It's not a terrible thought, frankly, to make a gacha game around Mortal Kombat, but I wouldn't be surprised if the monetization is crazy around that. I also wanted to mention, since I'm whining about my back hurting, which, yeah, who can't whine about their back hurting? I did see a video come out from the Minecraft YouTuber Good Times with Scar, and he talks about his I didn't bother to actually watch it, but he talks about his disability, and it shows like footage of him when he doesn't really do a face camera, and he's got an oxygen tube in his nose, so he does seem like he is one of a few disabled YouTubers out there that have gained success. At a certain level, that would be ideal, almost to the point where, I mean, jobs like being a YouTuber maybe should be exclusively for people who are not physically capable of doing other jobs. It would be very exclusionary, certainly, to say, hey, you're a perfectly healthy young person, you shouldn't be trying to be a YouTuber and creating art. You should be out working in an Amazon warehouse facility, ruining your back, moving packages around, and then after you've ruined your back, you can follow your dream of being a YouTuber. That's ridiculous. But at a certain point, it would be nice if disabled people were given more opportunities, I imagine, to make the art that they want to make. I don't really care about them making money or working jobs. I'm not the type of person that feels like everybody should be working in jobs no matter what. I say bring on the robots, bring on the automation, just make sure you bring on universal basic income with that so people don't starve to death. But it is not a human being's natural state to want to work. That is just people that feel that way have just been raised that way and effectively, for lack of a better term, brainwashed that way. Human beings, like all animals, want to save calories and energy to the maximum, to the point where they will, if allowed, become severely obese and unhealthy. But it is the natural state and the natural way human brain works to be lazy and to not want to do things or physical activity or even think unless they have a specific passion or desire on it. People do want to play games, they do want to create art, they do want to sing. Those are natural impulses of just, I'm getting dopamine from these things make me happy. You don't get dopamine, you're not happy working at a job. You can claim you're happy, so certainly working in a job, and you can be happier than starving to death, certainly, but you're not getting that dopamine hit in a job. And that's the point where jobs become work and something you have to stick to and struggle with, whereas art and games are just fun, and as soon as something stops being fun in an art or a game, you should just stop doing it. Because there's no reason to do those types of things if they aren't fun. Moving on, back to video game news. A Jak and Daxter inspired 3D platformer called Clive and Wrench is finally releasing in February. The game has apparently been in development for more than 10 years, which at that point you would call that development hell. So this is going to be almost certainly a 10-year-old feeling game. So yeah. Is this video gonna load? Yes, finally. It'd be kind of hard to justify playing Clive and Wrench now when I haven't played the Jak and Daxter game to start with. So yeah, that would be a little weird. Looking up from my phone here and actually looking at the video, it doesn't look awful. Yeah. It doesn't look incredibly awful. Maybe the heads-up display and UI is a little big, but this looks like something that could sell as far as 3D platformers. I'm always wanting more 3D platformers and then always turning out to be fairly uninterested or unhappy with 3D platformers because frankly they just kind of suck. Well, I've fixed the mini player issue somewhat, but not so much. I'll also say I'm trying to have... I had smooth scroll disabled in Firefox and I enabled it back, and it does feel like it smoothly scrolls a little bit better that way, but not amazingly better. I assume Clive is the bunny. I think there's a cartoon with a bunny called Clive, and Wrench is the monkey, as in Monkey Wrench. Apparently Guildford High Street has been remade in No Man's Sky. The UK town is home to several UK game studios, including Hello Games, which I assume is the company in charge of No Man's Sky. That being said, I don't know if this is particularly interesting as far as something to recreate, and I don't think that probably has much to do with actually playing the game No Man's Sky. It's basically just an Easter egg after the fact. Apparently, registration is open for a £100,000 e-Premier League. 4 competitors from the top 2 clubs will earn spots in the EA Sports FIFA 23 Global Series playoff. So, to register for that, I guess you would check out this article. Need for Speed Unbound's first gameplay trailer shows cop chases and betting. They had a bit of a reveal of Need for Speed Unbound, but apparently we didn't have all the reveals because now we're getting gameplay trailers, and it does seem like we may see a lot of promotion for Need for Speed Unbound, a lot of stories from coming up around it. Oddly, this may be the AAA game that is out and getting promoted right now, at least until something like God of War Ragnarok comes out or something else comes out. Let's see. We probably have already covered October's PlayStation Plus catalog and classic titles being released. GTA, Assassin's Creed, Dragon Quest, Yakuza, and Castlevania games. Yeah. Here's the full list. We covered that already. EA has announced its next-gen Sims game called Project Renee, which I don't know what would make a Sims game next-gen, really. I don't know if there really is a lot of value in making Sims games anymore in the first place. There is that rabid fan base of Sims players, but a lot of them have been pissed off by EA, so I wouldn't be surprised if that fan base is actually a lot smaller than you would think. Modern Warfare 2 Special Ops mode will add 3-player raids in December. Check out that article if you're interested. We're still going through Video Games Chronicle articles. We have about 10 more and then we'll be done. Disney Dreamlight Valley update includes 100 big bug fixes and improvements. And Donald Duck will lose his temper a lot less frequently. Yep. And it still really does just feel like a Disney adult game that I'm not sure has enough game in it. And yeah, the commentary by Giant Bomb that these Disney adults seem to be lovingly animated as being curvy and voluptuous is not countered when you see this kind of hourglass figure on this character with a big butt being shown and pretty medium-sized breast, I would say, but a decent amount of cleavage there. Like, the fact that this dress is cupping and curving here is weird. It would look a lot more realistic and reasonable if this cloth just connected here and then it was just kind of like a V-neck. But you'd really probably want it to be more of like a curved neckline. They just made a lot of room for extra necklaces, and choker necklace on regular necklace is a little extreme. I suppose this is probably a Frozen dress, and on the Frozen character, Elsa, I imagine, it looked differently. There's a whole list here of changes and bug fixes. Yep, it does feel like Dreamlight Valley is just slowly starting and is kind of more of an early access product, and then there might be a finished product in the future that's actually worth looking at. Modern Warfare 2 campaign release date, when does it unlock? Do we have an actual answer to that headline? October 28th. Yeah. Early access, October 20th, 10 a.m. October 19th, preloads. Well, yeah, check out this article if you're interested. Netflix says it's considering launching a cloud gaming service, cites Stadia's lessons. Its business model will differ from Stadia, its VP of Gaming says. They definitely should be considering it. That doesn't inherently mean they should be playing. They should go in that direction. But if anybody was going to do a streaming gaming service, Netflix makes a lot of sense because they are exclusively a streaming video service. So it's streaming video and streaming gaming versus the odd situation right now where it's streaming video, and then if you have the app installed on your phone, you can also install video games on your phone. But the video games are not particularly interesting. Call of Duty may not appear on Game Pass for a number of years due to a prior Activision-Sony deal. Microsoft has claimed it's bound by prior agreements to keep Call of Duty off the service. Which, yeah, Microsoft is still definitely arguing that it is not going to make Call of Duty a Game Pass exclusive anytime soon. Netflix is opening a new studio led by Overwatch's executive producer, or I guess Overwatch's old executive producer, Chaco Sony. I don't know how you'd pronounce our first name. Left Blizzard last year to, quote, take some time off. And I guess technically he did take some time off, but now has another job. Taking some time off, as your quote, does not reflect well on you a year later. Certainly, it's much better, I think, to say you're retiring or you're spending more time with your family. But even saying spending more time with your family doesn't look that good a year later when you're actually working for another company. The proper thing to say is to pursue other interests or pursue other options. But the fact that it's been a year may be that he had a non-compete clause for an entire year, which that seems like a really long non-compete clause. Opening a new studio led by the executive producer of Overwatch just makes me assume he's going to make something like Overwatch. That may not be true, but I can't really assume anything else. And while Overwatch was fairly well received, originally it kind of stagnated and died. It would be interesting if it turned out that this was the executive producer that led to characters like Tracer being so curvy and voluptuous and becoming just a fan favorite as your best girl anime waifu type character that even to this day has a ton of Rule 34 porn made based off of her, compared to Overwatch 2 where every single character is intentionally and obviously covered up, or at least half of the characters are intentionally and obviously covered up, and they just don't have a visual appeal at all. Even Tracer just doesn't really look that interesting. There definitely is this aspect where game developers nowadays seem to not want the perverts on the internet to perv on their characters, when they should be secretly praying that perverts on the internet do fall in love with your characters, because that's a kind of passion you cannot buy, and it will keep your game more interesting and relevant, or at least more talked about. But yeah, there's certainly a pushback on that. An example on Netflix where it kind of makes sense not to do that is Big Mouth, where they actively have animated the prepubescent kids in Big Mouth to be as ugly as possible because they didn't want any Rule 34 porn made based on it. I bet there's still a decent amount of it out there, but I can see where they were thinking that way. But inherently it makes the animated comedy series or animated drama series not look as good as it could have looked, and it kind of ruins the series. And for that reason, even though I probably would really enjoy Big Mouth, I haven't ever bothered to watch it, and I don't know if I could really put up with the bad animation to watch it. I barely can put up with the bad animation of Rick and Morty to watch Rick and Morty. Overwatch 2's McDonald's promotion offers customers an epic Tracer skin, and this is just like a different version of Tracer's outfit, but yeah, still kind of more padded out than you would expect it, because Tracer's original outfit was super skin tight, and I don't know if that was Tracer's haircut before. And I guess McDonald's has the golden arches, so the idea would be to have the golden yellow arches, but even in this logo, this is more of an orangish yellow, where this is more of a bright Pikachu yellow. Like, I see this little lightning bolt, which dangerously is just making a V pointing down to her groin. I see this little lightning bolt, and I assume that this is a Pikachu type skin, or a lightning, or like the Flash from comic books skin. I don't see anything here that screams McDonald's. Is the hairstyle here supposed to be like a McDonald's ice cream shake or French fries? That doesn't really work either. Yep. And we certainly are in a weird position right now where McDonald's is selling adult Happy Meal toys and also selling skins for video games. McDonald's trying to be relevant with the kids, when really no good parent would let their kids go to McDonald's even once. Like, it's bad food, it's unhealthy food, there's no reason to go. There are better burger places, healthier burger places, better tasting burger places in almost everybody's city. Um, moving on, Video Games Chronicle says finishing God of War's Norse Saga in 2 games or a trilogy was debated a lot. Sony Santa Monica says the upcoming sequel packs in a lot of content, which I guess we'll believe it when we see it. Most games don't promote themselves by saying there's a lot of content here, and frankly, if you did say that, I would be suspicious that there actually isn't a lot of content. There is no confirmation here, one way or another, though, that is a 2-game series, or if a trilogy will come about. The game is called Ragnarok, so you would kind of expect that it would be wrapped up in a game called Ragnarok, but who knows? You could certainly push it for a third. It says, Video Games Chronicle says that Silent Hill's YouTube channel seemingly reveals the game's early. References to new projects were discovered by fans and quickly removed. There's really no reason to even read this article, frankly. It doesn't matter. It's going to be announced later today. We'll see what actually gets shown at that point, instead of trying to do augmented reality type deep dives or just detective level deep dives to find something out a couple hours early. Naughty Dog says bringing its games to PC is a pivotal and transformative moment, but the Uncharted and Last of Us studio stresses that the PlayStation 5 remains its primary platform. Which, yeah, it is pivotal in that they're doing something different, and it is transformative in that by them doing something different, they probably learned how to port their games better to PC since they'd never done it before. We still have the major problem, though, in which most of the Uncharted games are not on PC, and I'm much more interested in playing the Uncharted series from the beginning on Steam than I am playing Last of Us 1 and then ignoring Last of Us 2, which I don't think I really would want to play, but then I'd feel some reason that I would have to play Last of Us 2. And as far as Naughty Dog, I don't think they've really made any other games worth mentioning. Then we also have this tagged advertisement, basically. A hotly anticipated Battle Royale Super People finally launches into early access. This is one of these bookmarked paid promotional things. Never even heard of this game. That gets us to Gematsu. Legend of Heroes Trails of Azure launches March 14th in North America, March 17th in Europe. I think we talked about that. Resident Evil Showcase set for October 20th. We already talked about that. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin DLC Wander of the Rift has a launch trailer, details, and screenshots if you're interested in that. Strangers in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is apparently more of a fantasy game than I would have thought. Really, at this point, much like the Persona and the Shin Megami Tensei series, I just don't see myself bothering to play any of the Final Fantasy games. In fact, that probably is in part a step towards not playing JRPGs at all. I played a couple of them in the past year, and I'm not sure I want to go further down that path. And if I do want to go down that path, I'm not sure I want to do the mainstream ones. Digimon World Next Order is coming to Switch on February 22nd in Japan, which, yeah, I never really heard too much praise for the other Digimon game, which I don't think is Digimon World Next Order. And I think I did hear that the other Digimon game that came out recently was pretty poorly translated into English, which that would also be an issue. Apparently, this next order is going to add a beginner mode and a run functionality, and almost certainly all JRPGs need beginner modes and run functionalities. Summertime Rendering Another Horizon has a debut trailer. There's definitely a character here that seems to only be ever depicted in wearing a school swimsuit, whereas every other characters are mostly in their casual clothes. It doesn't make the most sense, actually. If it's in the summer, then and these are Japanese people, they would be not going to school or cram school. You'd have to assume that this character is going to cram school and this character is going to special swimming lessons in the summer, and everybody else is taking the summer off. Although in Japan you still get a ton of like summer homework and ridiculous stuff like that. Also, I'd say when you look at like height comparisons, clearly you would have to assume this guy is a very old guy. So all these other characters being fairly tall seems to imply that they're all fairly old characters, like late last year high school, or in college, or college age at least. I'm not sure this game is coming out in the West at all. It's due out January 26th in Japan, and we'll probably get more bits of news around it. But yeah, watching the debut trailer right now is not a good idea. I'm trying to burn through the news fairly quickly, and I really am not succeeding on that. I talked way too much about Marvel Snap at the beginning of the stream, and now I'm just going to close a bunch of things that we've already talked about. God of War Ragnarok has a behind the scenes video called Shaping the Story if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Need for Speed Unbound Risk and Reward trailers, we talked about that. Harvest Moon Back to Nature has been rated for the PS5 and PS4 in Taiwan. Likely a new PlayStation Plus Classics title. Loop 8 Summer of Gods launches March 16th, 2023 in Japan for the PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, and March 21st for PC. Loop 8, have we talked or seen anything about Loop 8 before? I think we may have seen this before. Yeah, this definitely feels kind of like a Persona game. Going into dungeon crawling. Weird story with a name like Loop 8. I would suspect that it is maybe time traveling too. Harvestella details its winter locations, jobs, fairy orders, fear enemies, and more. Harvestelia. One sec as I turn up my fan. Yeah, I've gotten to the point where the fan going up and down is going to be a fairly common occurrence. And I don't want to take down my ceiling fan to rewire it to a smart home configuration, so I'll just live with that. Inherently, all the smart home configuration I've done so far on Wi-Fi probably should be on Zigbee, and there is not a I'm too pot committed at the moment on Wi-Fi to jump over. But if I was to start over from scratch, I would have bought Zigbee, a single Zigbee controller, and have everything be on Zigbee instead. Dragon Quest Treasures has a 30-minute early gameplay and screenshots if you want to check that out. Famitsu review scores, let's see, easy come, easy go off, 31 out of 40, so particularly bad. FIFA 23, 34 out of 40, that's a little bit better than average. Labyrinth of Zangetsu, 27 out of 40, which is really, really bad. And then Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher is 32 out of 40, just about average. So nothing amazing as far as this week. And I am still kind of expecting that there will be a recovery from Golden Week and we'll start to see more games announced. And almost certainly that's what's happening here with Silent Hill, is that Golden Week is over. Now we're going to have Silent Hill and Resident Evil announcements, and those are going to be the big thing. Certainly. There's keywords that were in the video, which the keywords don't really mean anything. Steam being the one that stands out to me, but that really doesn't mean anything at all. A game called Bravery and Greed launches November 15th, according to Gametsu. Looks like it's a beat-em-up co-op game. I just don't really have time to watch the trailer. Disney Dreamlight Valley Scar Kingdom update is now available. So, yeah. It seems like this update is kind of Halloween based, and a villain's star path does seem to imply that you will start doing actions and activities for the villains also, which that's a smart move because interacting and doing activities and minigames for the villains doubles the types of characters that could be in the game. It would be kind of weird if Dreamlight Valley existed in such a way that you were only ever interacting or seeing the good guys in movies, in Disney movies, because the bad guys in most Disney movies are the more interesting characters. Devil May Cry 5 has top 6 million sales, which really highlights that it is a very niche game. I mean, so niche really that I could probably only name Dante here, and I think this is Nero, and I couldn't for the life of me tell you who any of these other characters are, even though I know some of them are pretty important in Devil May Cry 5. Like 6 million is a big number certainly, but it's not 10 million. And Devil May Cry came out in June 30th of 2022, which actually I'm a little surprised. No, it didn't come out in June 20th. It came out in March 8th, 2019. That makes a lot more sense. And the special edition came out in 2020, a year later, basically. Neo: The World Ends With You is now available on Steam. It's no longer an Epic Games Store exclusive. It has been fairly consistent that when games do go over to Steam, that they are not getting really any fanfare. And notably, I programmed my macro to toggle the plus button, so when I just clicked on that link, it opened it in a completely different window on Firefox, which is not what I expected to happen. Yeah, this is definitely a game worth following, however, and it'll be interesting to see if maybe there's a worse response than I would expect on this game for some reason. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't play particularly well as a PC port. It is definitely a niche-er Japanese game that is probably being made by a developer that's not used to making PC games. It's being published by Square Enix. And I guess there is a question certainly to ask if we're boycotting, if there's a reason that people might be boycotting Square Enix at this point, just to save their own wallets and prevent them from buying potentially bad PC ports. Alright, that was the last Gamatsu game, so now let's try and burn through all of the games that came out on Steam. Oh, it is worth mentioning. Orienting simulator. Yeah, I like the idea. So I'm going to give this a follow, but then English language is not supported. It's German only, so I'm going to not give it a follow. I updated OBS and updated the important plugins that I use. And it seems like everything is working. I did need to change around some of the programming on the YouTube Shorts daily PC game concept. I'm a sucker for pinball, so I'll give this a follow. And I was doing that kind of haphazardly, so some of the YouTube Shorts will come out will be a little bit rough. Here's an interesting thought. Do you really want to play with these little magnet toys in a virtual world? I think no. I think that this kind of toy is 100% tactical, and you want to feel that in your hands. It's a very expensive toy, I have to point out, and kids are going to lose their interest in it very quickly. It's the kind of toy you might have at a STEM or a science lab in a school, so people could play with it and just be done with it, and then it could be handed off to the next person. It's not a good toy to really keep and have for the long term, in my opinion. This seems like one of those games where you just toss something and try and see how far you toss it, which there was a couple of those that were fairly popular back in the old days when you were playing online games that really couldn't do anything visually, but now much more complicated games can exist. We have a Neon Visuals isometric beat 'em up game with cards. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. Maybe being a little too generous today. Riley and Rochelle. Let's see. Seems to be kind of an investigation visual novel. We'll do that. Let's see. Dead Link. Dead Link is coming off as very positive. I think I saw a YouTuber put a video up that said it was a very good game. Card roguelike. Wow, I'm being very generous today, or at least I feel like I'm being very generous. Coin Blitz we can say no to, although I am interested in seeing a good, nicely animated coin pusher type game at some point in the future. Thread. Puppet themed platformer Metroidvania game. That's weird enough to get a follow. I just cleaned up all the follow list and YouTube short stuff, and now I'm filling it all back up. Which arguably maybe that is the case, that when I feel less pressure and there are less tabs open, then all of a sudden I'm more open to giving games a chance, versus when I look and see that there is a bunch of tabs open and then I feel the need to slim it down. Here we have Crash Bandicoot 4. I should at least read its name out loud and mention it, because yeah, that being on Steam is a big deal. Are You Afraid of the Dark, on the other hand, doesn't look like a big deal. Yeah, and we still should be seeing adult games, so I would expect to at least see one realistic animation style adult game pop up. Now, if this supports English, I might give this a chance, even though it looks very all over the place. Nope, it's Japanese only. There is this concern that crossed my mind that if at some point one of my videos gets flagged for not being family friendly and gets like a content ID strike for accidentally briefly flashing the screenshots of an adult game, well, then there's going to probably be a case where I'm going to have to go from that point to present and just remove those videos and delete them. So there could be a fairly large chunk of live streams that just get removed and are not going to be visible. And that's to assume that the algorithm wouldn't decide to give me just like 3 content ID strikes in a row and delete my channel, which that would really suck. And that would just probably be the end of me making YouTube content or video content in the first place. Alright, so we have a game called Sky Puzzle here that is tagged with hentai, and it has more of the flatter anime style to it, although I will say that I wouldn't 100% attribute this to an actual Japanese animator. And the screenshots are in scantily clad clothing, but they're not actually showing anything. It also seemingly is not in the adult section of the game. It doesn't support Japanese as a language. It's Russian, supports Russian and Chinese. There is no mature content warning at all. So it's pretty hard to put this game in the category of a actual adult game in any ways. It's more of one of these tease games where they imply that you might see something, but they've either censored out something you could actually have seen, or it was never there in the first place. And that is definitely an example of the types of games I was seeing exclusively when I didn't have the adult content toggle enabled. And that is the type of game that most people who by default, when you have a Steam account, will have that adult content toggle disabled. That's the kind of stuff people would see without actually seeing the stuff that actually goes the full Monty and would actually be appealing to people who do want adult content games. Nobody, I think, is particularly interested in the low effort match 3 lewd games. Right, missing pieces. Yeah, there might be something here. Try a third time, doesn't work. Okay, well, that game may have already been removed from Steam for some reason. I'm a little surprised that we don't see more games leaving Steam. It is worth mentioning also the new Steam app by default started giving me notifications for like every game on my wish list changing price, which is definitely not something I wanted, so I had to go in the settings and turn that off. Last thing I need is temptation to purchase things 365 days out of the year. But it does potentially highlight a direction that Steam is going, in that it may be trying to be more like Amazon.com and just imply that there always is a sale. Walmart really created that concept way more than anything else. Just the rollback prices, always on sale as a concept. But if Steam is going in that direction, then Steam and Valve are going to stop being known for their Steam sales, which they are kind of losing momentum on being known and loved for Steam sales anyways. And they may try to get more consistent income throughout the year, just with smaller individual games going on sale, which might be better in the long run for actually buying games and playing them instead of just buying them at Steam sales and then never getting around to playing them. So here we have an adult game called My Mistress, which definitely is the realistic style and definitely is going for a dominatrix latex type outfits. Each of these screenshots are not that explicit. They really are going all over the place with different types of costumes. There's just no consistency there. It's not even really a consistency in theme, because here you have like a police baton and leather, and then here you have a whip and a sword, which feels more fantasy, and then you look at the background here. And that's how you pretty much know all of this is just asset flipped garbage, and there's no real game. It's just a little puzzle game, and that's it. Just a slide puzzle game. The company developer claims it goes by the name 69 Games, which is surprising that name hasn't been used before. It's also an achievement game with 100 achievements for no real reason, which that's old school. It's also noticeably they've moved the mature content description to above the about this game, which is interesting, and that may be a new thing about Steam, is that we may now see mature content descriptions at the top, which maybe makes more sense because there have definitely been there are some exposed pictures in the game. What does that even mean? I suppose that means exposed body parts pictured in the game. There definitely have been times where you click about this game and then you click more, and then there's a image in the description that is also not safe for work. But you still are running into the problem where the first thing you see when you click on something is the videos and the screenshots. So if they choose to put completely inappropriate things here, and definitely depending on the age of your kids and how you want your kids raised, seeing a lady in even a skin tight outfit is not really safe for work, or not family friendly. YouTube goes with the phrase family friendly, which makes a little bit more sense. But even then, that you could certainly say there might be some incestuous families out there of adults that enjoy looking at basically porn together. It wouldn't be that uncommon for adult brothers to potentially watch the same porn, even in the same room. I definitely have heard that story before. Or even brothers and sisters. Believable. Parents and kids. That's a little bit creepier. Right, so this game is called Reborn, and it's apparently coming soon as a massive multiplayer VR experience. And I question it, really, if it actually would be anything. There's the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, which is probably the fall list content, and we're probably doing fall list cleanup at this point, where Uncharted is rated very positively. There's no reason not to put that on the wish list, other than the fact that seemingly nothing right now wants to work. There we go. We may just need to reload everything. But see, if that is a U, and we were going to use on the fall list, then Harmony's Odyssey is a brand new game, so maybe Uncharted got re-released on the list of things being re-released because it actually is available now and it was just pre-ordered before then. That would make sense. Alright, well, this game looks interesting, so we'll give that a follow. I'm gonna have to go through all these and make sure everything got a follow. Then we have an adult game called Hentai Fantasy World, which, even though it has the word hentai in it, it's really not anything that would a Japanese person would call hentai, as far as the anime girl in a 3D model running around with a gun and in a witch outfit just shooting people. Yeah, definitely looks low effort, definitely doesn't look that good. Really doesn't have a justification for early access. That's something I'd like to see Valve and Steam really crack down on, is just like stop letting things be in early access for no reason. It's English only, $1.19, so yeah, again, not really in that anime style or targeted towards a Japanese type audience. Next we have Furry Love and Sex. So I'd say so far that there has been two games in the category of targeted towards the West versus the East. Furry Love and Sex goes into that third category of being targeted to just furries, really. This is also the first adult game that has had screenshots where there's just hardcore porn on the screenshots. Other than that, I would say that Furry Love and Sex, as a match 3 adult game, doesn't look terrible if that's what you're looking for. It's coming soon in English and Russian. We may be seeing a resurgence at this point of Russian troll games, Russian garbage games. I'm not sure if there ever was really a significant depletion of those kinds of games, but I was filtering out Russian only games, but most Russian troll games, almost all of them, also support English. It is also worth mentioning, as I'm thinking about it, that the Steam app, once again, really getting away from blue as a theme. They're just slowly boiling the frog, and they're going to just slowly change everything from being blue themed to being just a dark mode, black and white themed. And at some point they really should just pull a trigger. Like, by default on a web page like this, and since most of the Steam app is just pulling up web pages, changing the font color from blue to white would significantly change how the page looks already. You can see a significant amount of these text is blue or gray. Getting rid of the background fixes a lot of it, and then it's really just changing little icons and color things. But that I think they are just slowly working their way towards that, and they could probably pull the trigger tomorrow, but they don't want to cause people to get upset, so they're boiling the frog over the course of years, it feels like. Next we have another 3D model, realistic model adult game called Heroes of Eroticism New Beginnings. Again, just straight up pornographic screenshots, and otherwise it is just 3D models. The first of 3 episodes apparently. Coming soon, English only. So it definitely feels like all of the adult games have been bundled into a Wednesday, or at least all the targeted towards the West adult games have been bundled to this Wednesday. And we are not seeing any adult games targeted to the East. And I know there's at least one that should have showed up and seemingly didn't. Do I want to play as a stickman in a Dark Souls game? Dark Souls clone. I don't think so. So yeah, it seems like there are different days and that there is a level of cramming and bundling the adult games so that they come out later in the week or at least specific days in the week. I'm even willing to go away from the thought that they were just trying to cram them in the weekend so they get less press, and they may very well just be cramming them on a specific day of the week because they're just, the people approving the games just don't want to look at the games. There's just this lack of professionalism that I suspect exists, in which they don't want to approve adult games except for one day that would be the bad day of the week for them, and that's not really fair to all the other game developers who are not making adult games and getting their games released whenever. Man, this puppet show getting a follow is really pushing it. Lethal Running, I think, is a little too pink for my art style as far as a roguelike action top-down twin-stick shooter. We have Neo, The World Ends With You. That one's already been put on the fall list, and that definitely deserves a YouTube short. Well, the good news is we're almost done. Because, yeah. The bad news is every time I try to be done with things faster, I'm really not getting faster or being more successful at that. And if anything, I'm just very consistently taking 3 to 4 hours to stream even when I want to move faster, which I guess maybe means that's just how long it takes. There we have a different kind of art style. I wouldn't immediately say it's bad. I almost want to say it feels almost like a Taiwanese art style, or maybe Korean. Yeah, this is fairly consistent in its art style, enough that I wouldn't just say this is a bad animator animating things, although this character clearly not as well animated as the main characters. It's a psychological horror visual novel, so I'll be very generous. Also English only. And heck, if this was going to be the art style of a lot of Western animators, that could evolve into something. Inherently, the problem with animation is that animation hasn't really evolved at all since anime did it. There was Disney animation, and then anime was based off of old Disney animations that then the Japanese animators went further and further in different directions from that break point. But in the West, with Disney animation, it really was very slow evolution from something like Sleeping Beauty up to the last classically animated show, which would probably be something like Beauty and the Beast. And then after whatever movie it was, they then started to do 3D animation and compete in that, and that's a completely different style. And the hand-drawn animation, as far as Disney and the Western world in general, just completely disappeared, or almost completely disappeared. And then 3D CG has evolved as its own third type of animation, but now Disney doesn't even really care about that in particular, and so now we have realistic CG that's not even what you would call animation as much as you would call it just virtual renderings. Things like the Lion King remake isn't it what I'm thinking about, where it's designed to look realistic and look nothing like a cartoon at all. And so that just creates a yet another branch, not a smooth transition or smooth improvement. Moving on, Sony's new DualSense Edge controller will launch next year and it won't come cheap, according to GameDeveloper.com. We already talked about that. XP Games executive raised $5 million in funding for a new game studio called Magic Games. I don't know Peak Games as a company, though. Apparently, it's in Turkey, with a second office maybe in Europe. Yeah, this is too inside baseball, though, because they're talking about a company that I don't even recognize. The next Sims game aims to be a next-generation creative platform. Okay. We'll wait for more news on that game. The National Labor Review Board says that QA workers at Blizzard Albany can proceed with the union vote. Activision Blizzard refused to voluntarily recognize the union, but its arguments for doing so have been rebuffed by the National Labor Review Board, which that's not super crazy that Activision Blizzard, who's actively fighting unionization, would continue to actively fight against unionization. We are now also seeing a new logo for a Game Workers Alliance instead of just adopting the Communication Workers Alliance logo. It's still Workers Alliance, it's just communication workers or people that worked at cell phone companies and landline companies, and game workers are going to be people that work at game companies. Inherently, I do believe that CWA is losing membership fast as phone companies go the way of the dinosaur, and that they are looking to add to their numbers through the Game Workers Alliance, and at some point the CWA may fully just change its name to the GWA, although it would just make sense to look forward future wise and find something that covered both of them, say Technical Workers Alliance instead, TWA, or Scientific Workers Alliance maybe is the wrong one, but that might work too, or Artist Workers Alliance. But yeah, they've got a whole logo now, and I doubt this A stands for Albany so much as this A is just Alliance again. Yeah, and the National Labor Review Board almost certainly is not going to side with Activision Blizzard and stop them from making a union. The actual argument here as to why the National Labor Review Board rejected the arguments seems not to be really not really being covered particularly well. Here it is. The parties stipulated that any unit to be appropriate must include all associate test analysis and test analysis. However, the employer seeks to exclude a single employee assigned to the World of Warcraft franchise rather than the Diablo franchise. It wrote I assume this is Activision Blizzard writing this. There's a limited record evidence regarding any terms and conditions of employment that would render the employee ineligible or ineligible voter, therefore making no findings as to whether this single named employee is eligible or ineligible to vote. So they were trying to get rid of one of 21 people, which 21 people voting unionized doesn't sound like a lot, but then also Activision Blizzard Albany may be an office that has only 50 people in it in total, and may have really only 20 associate level employees, or 22 associate level employees. And it's not super crazy for 21 people being willing to risk their jobs by voting to unionize, and not really following the will of 500 other employees not willing to vote or risk their jobs, or who just don't care one way or the other. Like, if there was an active amount of people who are against it, then 21 people wouldn't have been able to vote for it. There was something else I just thought of that I wanted to mention too, not specifically around this. Oh yeah, there is also this trend amongst managers and rich people, at least according to r/anti-work on Reddit, where people are, CEOs, managers are ranting about employees working second jobs, and claiming that that is somehow stealing from your company by going and working a second job, which is insane, because what that really would imply is that they want you to think 24/7 about doing their job, and they want you to be mentally on the clock 24/7. And the companies have never really liked the idea of moonlighting and working two jobs, but they have never bothered to raise pay to avoid people working two jobs. Very few people want to work two jobs. Very few people even want to work one job. They do it because nothing pays well enough. And a lot of this all, once again, gets fixed with universal basic income. Microsoft also says, the other one was Activision Blizzard, soon to be part of Microsoft, that the UK's regulators' concerns over Activision Blizzard's deal are misplaced. This is basically the exact same thing they said weeks ago, and it seems like they're either saying it again, or GameDeveloper.com is just publishing the same article again. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like there's a new update to the story. And there really won't be any relevant update to the story until we either have the UK say no, or the UK say yes, or the whole acquisition go through. We already talked about Devil May Cry. Yeah, I still have no idea who this character is. Moving on. Then we have a game from 2021 called Where's Samantha? It kind of looks like a Kirby's Epic Yarn game. It's 72% positive, 99 cents. It's a cheap enough game to make an executive decision and put on the wish list, even if it isn't really relevant, by only having 11 reviews. Where the Wind Becomes Quiet, on the other hand, is mixed reviewed. Looks like it's a probably asset flip walking simulator. Although in all fairness, almost all walking simulators are asset flip games by some definition, so I don't tend to use that term too often anymore. Where the Snow Settles, we're going through things starting with W. Let's see. I think we can say no to this. Doesn't look visually appealing enough. Where the Shadows Slumber. Looks more like a puzzle game. 10 reviews, 90%. $2.99. I'm probably being way too generous, but I'm going to put this on the wish list too. Not that I even really need extra things. See, like, here's a great example of a game that I really do want to play, and I remember when this came out in 2021, but these puzzle games in particular just don't really have that much relevancy people just don't play them and they don't review them if they do play them. So once again, we'll put that on the follow list. This Where the Night Calls, though, I think we might be able to say no to. LGBTQ plus visual novel. Does it have full voice acting? No. Apparently does work on a Steam Deck. Yeah. While I do appreciate these games existing and being on Steam, I don't think that me going through them is best for my channel or something that I even particularly am that interested in. Small game about farming community and loss. $2.99. See, and at this point, with 3 user reviews, it doesn't even have a percentage. Not recommended, no point, no purpose, mainly no fun. Very short gameplay, not much story, mindless wheat farming. Alright, so that's enough negative reviews to take that off the follow list. I do kind of like the attempt at a different type of art style here, the pixely, folksy kind of visuals. What the Golf? It's rated very positively. I should make sure that these games have single player and don't require VR too. But yeah, What the Golf is rated very positively, so that can make it to the wish list. What makes it special? Now, in all fairness, I will almost certainly draw a line as far as the more anime style, moe style in this case, of visual novels, and maybe consider those a little bit more. That being said, I think unless there was voice acting here, the only reason I consider this is because this is English and Polish and not Japanese, which, yeah, I don't know if there really is a Polish tradition in animation. So it definitely seems like this is inspired by a anime moe style, although noticeably different, because you have these anime kids, part of a newspaper, school newspaper, which I'm not sure they even do school newspapers in Japan, and they're in this school, and yet none of them are wearing outfits, school uniforms. Yeah, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Well, you would not be in school in Japan not wearing a school uniform. I'm going to just leave that on the follow, just in case someday I need a Polish visual novel. What Lies in the Multiverse is rated very positively, and it's a puzzle platformer with time manipulation. That looks good, so that can go on the wish list. We've got quite a few games that have made it to the wish list today. And then Wetlands. Really, I'm gonna just have to leave this until I'm considering playing a lot of older games. A lot of these Ziggurat games in particular are just like very old games. And that should do me for today as far as news. Let me just go through my Twitter feed. It'll be 1 hour from now that the Silent Hill, well, no, actually this was put out an hour ago, so the Silent Hill news very much just started. So I imagine there's gonna be some setup, and then we'll reveal things in the next 20 minutes or so. Silent Hill Ascension was announced, developed by Jinvid Entertainment, coming in 2023. Here's some screenshots. I don't know what kind of game it is. Silent Hill F is announced, a brand new Silent Hill game developed by Neobards Entertainment, which I guess made Reverse. Story by Rikushi07. Definitely feels like it might be more Japanese than most Silent Hill games. And that was 9 seconds ago that tweet came out, so we are getting the announcements as they're happening. There's a lot of the Tales from the Borderlands 2, new Tales from the Borderlands game, I guess that's what it's called. A lot of advertisement and push for that where they're showing screenshots and trying to build hype around it. I don't think that there's a ton of interesting things to say about it until the game actually comes out, though. Apparently Netflix has opened a new game development studio in California. Maybe we've talked about that, or maybe that is yet another new game development studio. We'll double check on that news on Friday. Apparently Microsoft has outlined plans to create a next generation game store to compete with Apple and Google, aided by its proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So we may very well see more competition as far as game stores selling mobile games. I assume that's mobile games selling on mobile platforms, and that might mean that we start to see more competition against Steam. Hopefully it's true competition and we don't all of a sudden see all the Microsoft games that have been put on Steam get removed from Steam and be put on some kind of Battle.net game store instead. But yeah, GameDeveloper.com says that they're revving up a mobile game store. And frankly, mobile gaming needs Microsoft to do something like that because there just aren't that many good games mobily available. And arguably maybe that doesn't mean we will get good games for cell phones, but if Microsoft has more interest in making its store succeed, they might start to pay more people to make mobile versions of their games if it makes sense. Although I seriously, as a YouTuber, can't start playing a ton of mobile games. That doesn't make any sense, and that doesn't work for me, and I'm not sure how many people really want to.
No.
What was that? Why is that playing audio at all? I don't know if that audio played from this video I was trying to watch. Yeah, there's this YouTube gaming. How is it that Indie Gamer 01 always finds the best looking indies? Check out this first look at Season from Steam Next Fest 2022. And he's showing a video where you are mountain biking. But yeah, I don't know why that page would have played audio. My auto mute plugin should have stopped that. And I guess if I stick with Firefox, which probably will, I need to make sure that plugins like that are always working. Let's see, the game developer behind Untitled Goose Game, Unpacking and Rain on Your Parade, weighs on how best to respect players' time when shipping new content. I suppose that's more of a editorial than a news piece. Yeah. Gearbox Official is also pushing plushies, which, yeah, American McGee's YouTube channel is pushing plushies even more. They're putting more polish into commercials, pushing the selling of their plushies even more than they have, which, and boy, does that come off very sad. Like, this person who made a very nichely beloved game in American McGee's Alice has now been boiled down to just a plushie salesman and is pretending more than actually succeeding at making another Alice game. Or at least that's the way it seems now, until he actually succeeds at releasing Alice Asylum. Yeah, I need to probably play off screen, but we also have like 8 days here, so as long as I kind of focus on link summoning a lot, I probably will get all of that done. And then gold tier 3, it'd be nice if I could get up to platinum tier before the end of the month, but maybe not. Here we have a Batman Minecraft thing. Yeah. I don't know why the audio is coming on all of these. Let's see. Because that's been 2 on the exact same page. Get this current tab. Let's do that. And see if that works. I think I probably covered everything. We didn't really cover this article, but we covered this topic more than well enough. But Game Developer has an update from yesterday as far as the casting controversy. Pretty much there will be no punishment if it is the case that the Western old voice actress did straight up lie. She'll get away with it. She'll probably, regardless of whether she said the truth or not, never work in the voice acting industry again anyways, and seemingly she knew that and wanted that because she wanted to move on to her theatrical work, which, working in the theater, I don't know how well that really pays, but like, apparently it may pay more than voice acting or be her true passion. Yeah. Otherwise, though, I think that's all the stuff here. Silent Hill Townfall has been announced. The game is developed at a Scottish studio, No Code, and will be published by Annapurna Interactive. Interestingly, keeping Konami not really involved that much. So, multiple Silent Hill games. Here we can see Marvel Games saying congratulations to Second Dinner, and Second Dinner retweeting it, but Marvel themselves, which is different to Marvel Games, not really giving them much of a push. In the tutorial, you play with Spider-Man as a card. At that time, he doesn't have an effect. I never saw anyone else ever playing with Spider-Man. I think you have to buy the Battle Pass to get any Spider-Man cards. Bluebird Team's Silent Hill 2 remake is officially coming to PS5 and PC. So again, Silent Hill 2 remake, but not Silent Hill 1, which I feel like that is just a case that Silent Hill 1 is out of the picture, and it's just not going to be canonical. And so it seems kind of ridiculous to call it Silent Hill 2 and not just fully reboot the experience. But I guess it's just to avoid confusion. Here we can see a couple more screenshots. It's really not anything, though, to be super interested in. And then here's another screenshot for Silent Hill Downfall. It is very, very weird, though, that there isn't just something called Silent Hill that's popping up. Here's some more details on Silent Hill 2. They're just rapidly adding updates. And on that revelation, I think that's as good of a place as I can get to end this stream. We'll have more detailed things to say about Silent Hill announcements on Friday, and otherwise everything else we'll talk about on Friday too. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.